Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Travel with Rick Steves Europe. My name is Emily Burks, and I am thrilled to be your host this evening. Tonight, we are taking a virtual road trip through Portugal with one of our Monday Night Travel favorites. He is a Moon Guidebook author of Grand European Journeys. He is the owner and director of Morocco tour company Journey Beyond Travel. And he is one of our favorite guests. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Lucas Peters back to the show. Welcome, Lucas.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me back.
I am so glad to see you back. And you were with us almost exactly a year ago, 54 weeks to be precise. And so I'm hoping you can catch us up on your travel highlights since last October.
Yeah, I have the comments up here. I like want to talk to everybody, but so just hey guys, yeah, the Hokkaido. That's not a print. That's Lego, which is me and my kids. We'll talk about more about my kids later, but we have a blast with Lego from time to time. Um, yeah. So in the last, so the last year, almost to the day, I think you counted earlier. You said it was like 54 days or something like, or 54 weeks since I'd been on
Yes,
last.
54
Yeah.
weeks.
And so the last time I dialed in was from Tallinn, Estonia at 4 a.m. to talk about my trip through the Balkans and the Baltics, which was amazing. That was really cool. But the last year's been pretty incredible. We've had really fun trips from, I live in Tangier full time, Tangier, Morocco. So we get to pop into Europe pretty regularly. So to pop into Europe is kind of cool. So I've done some cool trips in Andalusia and up in Paris and of course in Morocco, which I was working on the fourth edition of the Morocco guidebook. So I've been doing a lot of Morocco stuff. But the biggest highlight in the middle happened in June. My wife and I we abandoned our children for a week. We left them with the grandparents. And we went, well, a week, it was more like almost 2 weeks. But we went to Kenya and we did a walking safari in the north of Kenya, which gets like less than 1% of tourism. It's far away from like the Masai Mara and all that sort of stuff that you probably hear about like when you're thinking safaris. So we were hiking through the Ndodo Mountains with a group of Samburu warriors with a really incredible outfit. And the kind of things you like we saw and we experienced are not necessarily the things you think about when you're on safari. It was a lot of culture, a lot of people. Yes, we saw elephants in the wild. Yes, we were. I was telling you earlier about the black mamba. There's like supposedly a black mamba, somewhere around the camp we had to watch out for. I did see a scorpion, like a scorpion in the sand. So, there's some of the dangers and stuff there a little bit. But I mean, we spent a week hiking in incredibly rural nature, going through these villages that are a 2 days walk through this, mountainous, kind of dangerous terrain to get to the local hospital. So it was perspective shifting, like I think a lot of times when we travel, like a lot of stuff is just fun. Some of it is eye-opening, some of it is like, I don't know, you get an appreciation for an art or something. Other stuff kind of shifts your perspective on your how you see life. And that was one of these things for us. It was just like we came back home and we're like, let's take a breath. Let's kind of process a little bit what we just saw, what we experienced, and like how do we adapt some of these lessons to our own life, to our own family, to our own communities, and just kind of rethink a little bit what we're doing. So yeah, that was huge. That was really, really huge for us. So I'm calling to you guys from Tangier, Morocco. It is 2 in the morning over here. So I've had a cup of coffee like about an hour ago, and so I got to balance it out a little bit. But I thought I would have a nice little red. Hopefully it'll be nice on the throat. So chin chin to all you guys out there.
Cheers, Lucas. I'm having
Cheers.
some Vinho Verde, which
Uh,
is another good Portuguese wine. Very
Yeah,
refreshing, very good in the summertime, and very good
I
with
can't
live
wait to
webinars on Portugal. So, cheers.
I can't wait to talk a little bit about Portuguese wine. I was in Lisbon and I had a really great wine tasting, and I brought a few little notes here because I was like, all right, so Teresa's gonna love it if I, bring a little knowledge. So like, because I can't remember the names at all. We'll get to that in a second. But before I started, I will share with you guys some pictures, kind of a map of how we went about stuff. But before I share the like kind of the picture stuff, I thought I'd give you a little preview of a few things. So. Lisa, we were on earlier, and Lisa and I got into talking about sardines. So I did not know I loved sardines until I was in Portugal. and then when I moved to Morocco a little bit later, I was like, oh yeah, I like sardines, you know. Um, that's something I don't know. I grew up in Seattle. We don't really have sardines. We have salmon, we have halibut, and those are your two fish, right? So that's our two choices, salmon and halibut, right? So we yeah, man, you know, like I think for me that was a flavorful, interesting if you like yeah, I mean, if you like some sort of like a tuna or something like that, it's a blue fish. So if you like a tuna, if you like garlic, if you like olive oil, if you like tomatoes, like awesome. Like that, we'll get to this, but you'll see what we did here with the sardines. And then the other thing I want to show everybody, this is kind of, and I just want to do, I'm kind of on the big thing. So these bowls, right? You might think they're just a pottery bowl, but in the south of Portugal, they create these bowls with the ceramic in the middle where actually you grate your garlic and your olives on here. One of the coolest souvenirs, like most useful anyway, souvenirs we brought because we do a lot of garlic, a lot of tomatoes, and we're using this thing all the time. And it just, yeah, I mean that's a cool one right there. So we'll get to this in a little bit, but I thought it'd be kind of neat to kind of show that before we get started. So to set the scene a little bit, so I do write for the Moon Guidebooks. I'm mostly known for doing Morocco, I think, for a lot of people. Moon approached me a couple years ago, and this is why I was on doing earlier on last year doing the Monday Night Travel with Gabe, where we talked my trip through the Balkans and the Baltics. That was part of this Grand European Journeys book that I did. And and this is like a collection of like I mean, we're decades actually of travel in Europe. And so the idea was to do a lot of these modular sort of different sorts of itineraries. One of the things when we got to Portugal is I always thought Portugal made a great road trip and a really good addition to if you're in Andalusia, you have a little bit of time you can spend, 10 days, 12 days, maybe even just a week if you're pretty high speed, if you're a very high paced traveler. Um, and I was thinking that it would be great to do a road trip through Portugal. I just never done one. So I wanted to see what the logistics were. And it so happened like this last summer was sort of a perfect moment for that. So the concept with this is you would rent a car likely in Sevilla and then you check it back in Sevilla. So, you'd run it in Sevilla, you drive through Portugal, loop around, and then you're going to recheck it in Sevilla. So that's sort of the setup with this. So the idea is in Portugal, we're going to start in for us, we started in the south, so along the Algarve coast and Lagos, and then we moved north up through like Lisboa, Lisbon, Sintra, up the coast to Porto, and then kind of back down on that last stop you'll see up there is Castelo Branco. That was our last stop before crossing our last stay before crossing the border. So and then that road actually you can take that road all the way back down to Sevilla. So the whole setup for this was like, hey, how do we do that road trip? And we thought it'd be a fun family road trip. So we packed up the Jeep and we did a very much a Europe through the back door, Rick. We went through the back door of Europe. We went from Tangier up into Europe because that's like a Europe back door, right? So it was fun. We brought that Europe through the back door, and I was actually I have a 20, I think mine's from 2013. I have a 2013 copy of Rick's Europe through the back door. Amazingly, a lot of this is still relative, some of the prices change, of course, and all that, but like there's still a lot of pointers and stuff in there that I think are very much still today, very much something you can do, something you can use. And yeah, so anyway, so we went with a collection of guidebooks, and this was kind of our thing. We were started in the Algarve, went up through Lisbon, Sintra. We did some camping right off the Atlantic coast. Did Porto, and then went through the Serra de Estrella Mountains to Castelo Branco, and then back. And the whole trip was about 10 days for us. Our idea was we wanted at least 2 nights kind of at each stop. So we did 2 nights all the way through for their 4 stays, and then one night in Castelo Branco before we came back. So 9 nights, 10 days. I thought the pacing was pretty good, although truthfully, I'm a slow traveler, so I could always go slower. Like yeah, I could always do another, couple days in Porto, another couple days in Lisbon, another day to just relax on the beach. And so you guys know who we're talking about here. So that's me up on the left. That's my wife over there, and that's my kids, Seth and Maya. Maya's wearing the colorful band there. You'll see some pictures of them. They are very much volunteering uh their time, and I have them do like some projects as we go along. Oh, my Aunt Mimi's on here. Hi. That's fun. I'm seeing a few of my family pop up on here too. That's pretty fun. So everybody gets the family slideshow. So so some of the basics I wanted to bring up before you even get going on the road trip. If you're interested in road tripping, and this kind of goes for Portugal, but almost anywhere I've found in Europe so far though, and I've done road trips from Bulgaria, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Porto. A lot of Europe I've done road trips for. These days, I would highly consider an electric car. I find them very, very cost effective. In Portugal, uh, particularly as in Portugal, I mean, the gas was up to about $7 a gallon when you do all the conversions. I think I paid at one point almost $8 a gallon. So that adds up, if you're running on fuel. Uh, Also have hi mom, my mom's on here too. And then have a paper map. You'll see we actually did use a paper map. So paper map is I always travel with I'm big, yeah, as much as we do use the phone and use the GPS, you want to have a paper map just in case. And then we also found that having a little audio downloaded already was fantastic. So we already had some podcasts and music. And then we just kind of programmed, hey, every 1 to 2 hours we'd stop. If it had to be sooner, of course, but like in our program was already like, hey, we're not going to drive for more than 2 hours without having a stop. And I think just having that programmed in helps when you're doing your own road trip. Uh, and you'll see the Grand European Journeys right there. And that's that little photo is like coming right through. Here's us going on the Europe through the back door. I do have a lot of people ask me questions about like cameras and stuff like that, like photo stuff. What I would do, and I remember I met Rick in Tangier about 3 years ago now. Maybe it's like 4 years ago, man, 3, 4 years ago. And we were talking about how it is traveling and the advantages of like having a camera. So the one I use a lot, I have like there's a ton like this, but I use like this little Sony. It's like you can see it's like fits in the palm of your hand. You can shove it in a pocket. It has a longer zoom range than your phone. I'm sure the phones will catch up with it eventually, but I like the tactile buttons. So when I'm driving, I can sneak a photo like this in without hopefully endangering too many people around me. Um, I see a lot. There's a few questions about electric cars and stuff up there. Charging stations super readily available. They'll have the charging like little component for you that you need. Like it's a really easy kind of fit in there. Hi Bob. Hi Sue. Um, and then someone asked about Morocco. Yeah, Morocco's fantastic. Yes, come to Morocco. And yes, I did. You don't take the ferry from Morocco to Sevilla. I should clarify that. It's Morocco. So you're coming from Tangier into Tarifa, Spain. So, uh, and this is about a Portuguese road trip. So to kind of set the scene here a little bit, what we're doing is we do a lot of research, right? So we're going into Portugal, and I'm a big fan of like printed text and everything. So I had the Grand European Journeys touches on this a little bit, but again, I'm kind of doing it for the next edition. But I did use Rick's Portugal book. I downloaded that on my phone, so my wife and I were searching through that quite a bit. So we were using the that, and this is how we found one of the guides you'll meet a little bit later in Lisbon. We also used the Moon guide as well. I happen to have a paper guidebook for this. Moon was kind enough; they'd sent me a bunch of like free books at one point, and I happen to have Portugal, which was cool. But yeah, Carrie Marie Bradley, she does a great book there. So yeah, I'd say for me, you can never kind of have too many guidebooks, so I'll have a couple. Uh, Traveling with kids, the nice thing about traveling with kids is they open up potentially, if you let them, they open up other avenues for you for discovery. And for me, with our children, we don't really do a lot of screens, and so we do bring a lot of stuff for them. So especially if we're in the car or if we're on on a train or on a plane, we'll have like a bag of just stuff for them. And inevitably, we have a few books. I found guidebooks at this age now are wonderful because our kids can kind of flip through them and they can kind of help you pick stuff, right? So it could be the site you want to see, the experience you want to do, the restaurant you want to go to. So we give them that material. And so we were doing this a lot as we go along. Here's my son Zephyr right there, flipping through the Portugal book. Um, and we did that all throughout the trip, all throughout the trip. Our first big stop was Lagos. Not for any other reason did we go to Lagos other than they had a really, I mean, we wanted to start in Algarve on the coast and everything, but in Lagos they had a camping site there. And one of the things that we wanted to do was mix up our road trip between hotel stays and camping as well. So we brought one of the reasons we brought the Jeep is we have our fold-out tent and everything. And the thing we discovered in Portugal, and this is the case throughout Europe, is there's less and less like tent camping, and there is more and more sort of caravan camping, if you want to call being in a caravan camping, which I don't know. If you grow up in the Pacific Northwest, that's not camping, you know. So we wanted somewhere where we could pitch a tent, roast marshmallows and do all that stuff with the kids. So we were close to Lagos, so this was kind of our first stop over here. And I mean, Lagos is kind of an interesting city. One of the most interesting sites there that they had was the former slave market. It was the first one ever in Portugal, and it highlights a low light really of Portuguese history where they're involved in the heavily involved in the slave trade. And it was incredibly interactive. I was pretty surprised at how much our children got out of that. It was the kind of museum for myself. I've been through a lot of different sorts of museums, a couple floors, a few things to read. And for myself, I could have been in and out of there in 20 to 30 minutes and would have thought, hey, I learned something that's great. Kids took almost an hour and a half. They were really enthralled. They wanted to get all the stories. Um, and for me, I think that was one of those eye-opening things where I'm like, wow, this is something that they're kind of learning about for the first time. That's something they hadn't had in school yet, something that they haven't covered. So just the idea of slavery for them totally a foreign concept. So they're trying to understand this idea. Why was it okay? We'll put in quotes at that time. Yeah, just how did this even evolve or function? So they had a lot of questions. They were really, really, really interested little museum people. I can't say that they're like that all the time at all the museums, but this one in particular, it did hit them for some reason. And then of course we go out, we're in Lagos. Lagos is very touristy. I mean, beyond there is some really nice, and we'll get to the beach over there in a second, but there is a nice like old town there, where you do find your little, I don't know, tchotchkes and that sort of thing. You'll see our this is where we picked up our little dish right here, where you can do the garlic and the tomatoes. Uh, Which I don't know. I look at this and I'm just like, oh man, I could have a slice of bread and some of that right now. That's Mediterranean cuisine at its finest, like some of one of the most for me, one of the reasons I travel is food, just to try some different things. But inevitably, the Mediterranean, this region, it is very, very overlapping, very similar. They have a soup like a seafood soup with like whitefish, clams, prawns, tomatoes, herbs that they make in southern Portugal, and I swear it's the same soup that I find here in Tangier. Like I swear, it's the same sort of ingredients, the same sort of ideas, and it is delicious. But it has that Mediterranean kind of hominess, that thing you want to have on a Sunday. And Lagos itself is it's a pretty place, and our kids had just a wonderful time running around, getting kind of beachy, and going out to the beach. Uh, so the sea stacks here are great. Like visually, this beach is great. And even I'd say the sand and stuff is really nice. But what it doesn't prepare you for is the coldness of that water. Emily, we were talking earlier about if if you grew up in Seattle, if you've ever taken a dip in the Pacific down at Ocean Shores or down in the Puget Sound, and this to me is like that. It's that cold. Yeah, it is frigid. Just shockingly cold. So we did what we could. It was a hot, sunny day, and we wouldn't be in the water, for more than a few minutes at a time, enough to kind of cool out, and you come back to the beach. Um,
So you were
but
you
the
were cold plunging as
yeah,
opposed
yeah,
to swimming more so.
very much cold plunging. The nice thing about having a beach that if you're doing a vacation like this is if you have young kids, I mean, just give them some time at the beach. Everybody enjoys it. I got to hang out and read a book for a little while. The kids, were being kids. We found this like little remote. Oh, I should go back. If you swim out through this cave right there and you take a right, by swim, I mean wade up to your knees. It's not that deep. So you wade up to your knees. It's not that deep. But you walk out of that cave and you take a right and you hit this like little kind of secluded beach over there, which you can kind of have to yourself for a while. So, we played pirates and, just had a little beach time. And in the meantime, what did the kids do on the beach? They're making castles. They're digging holes. They're gonna find the next side of the planet. And this is, that was Lagos for us. It was we're gonna spend some time, in the town, and then we're gonna spend some time in the beach, and that was, about a day right there. Um, the next day we spent some time in Portimao. So, we woke up, packed up our camping gear, and we said, okay, we got a little bit of time before we're gonna head up to Lisbon. So, let's discover a little bit what else in the Algarve we can check out. Um, and so this is where we tried sardines. So I'll link in the contact or in the chat. I think we can put up the contact information for the uh, the sardine factory there. But this is another one. If you were like sardines, even just going to the factory to see like how they're still doing this, how all this big machinery is used on these little fish, and how they are cured and treated and seasoned and packaged and all that stuff. Um, Really interesting. And I think for kids, I think kids too, like when you're traveling with children, they like to see how stuff works. So if you kind of give them big machines and show them how a machine works, there's something to that. I think a lot of them are kind of drawn to that sort of thing. And so we had a really, really good time doing sardines. And at the end of it, we got to package up our own like little sardine tins, right? Which I still have. I still have a few of these. So we, walked around Portimao. We found a restaurant that actually has, they specialize in these like sardine packages and other like packaged kind of things in Portugal that are very particular that are done locally. What I find price wise an interesting note. So we paid I think about €4 for these at the factory. To buy the same one for lunch was €11. So should you wish to save a few, you can go to the factory, have a nice tour, and then you can pick up your own there. And take it to on a little picnic. But I do suggest, as always, in with gelato because your kids are gonna love that. You have to build in the ice cream treats for everybody. It's I love it maybe more than my daughter actually, but man, she she loves her gelato.
I find that almost hard to believe, Lucas, based on this picture.
Mm.
Your photos, though, I have to say, are really striking. Are
Okay.
you a photographer by any
I'm a
means?
No, I mean, yeah, yes and no. I'm a proficient amateur, I'd say, when it comes to like I can do some photography. I think University of Washington, I did spend 2 years at art school there. I never took a photography class, but I think the idea of composition, light, I have some of that. But I think, yeah, I mean, these days between school, YouTube, you can learn a lot. So if you're interested, you can learn a lot about just the composition, lighting. You can learn editing, all that stuff. I don't do a ton of that, but you can. And then yeah, just have the right tool. Like I said, I'm using this little thing 9 times out of 10. Like that, I use this a ton. But
What
your
is
phone.
that little thing?
Oh, sorry, sorry. I was saying this earlier. This is my little Sony. I have a Sony. I'll get technical. This is a Sony RX100 Mark 7. It has a 24 to 200 millimeter zoom range, if that means anything to anybody. Basically, it can make that thing way over there look closer, so you can kind of zoom in, and it does wide, decently kind of wide shots. You can do something like this where you're kind of close to Maya, and then gonna have the carousel in the background. So, but yeah, it's a real like. There's a few like Canon does some of these Fuji like these like smaller cameras. I think are great when you're traveling. You don't have to lug around like a whole kit of like different lenses and all that stuff. Not to say I haven't done that and I don't do that. I do. I do that as well. But yeah. Let's see. Thanks for the compliments to you guys on the photos. So yeah, then we end up in Lisbon. So in Lisbon, we stayed at the Jam Lisbon. So this is our first hotel stay. We specifically chose this because it's a little bit out of central Lisbon. We wanted to be kind of close to the riverfront. And the I believe it's the 28 tram that is the one that is like known for everybody wants to take that. It's the kind of picturesque one. Haven't been there a couple times. There's a couple other tram lines you can use. The 25 is a good one, the 26. And then there's some river, I think it's the 15 and I don't know, I have it down here somewhere, but 15 and 17, I think. But I like this. We're by the Santos station, and I like 15 and 18, sorry. But we're down by the Santos station, and I like that area because we're actually using the tram to get into town. So this is one of the reasons we were staying there. So um yeah, we were staying in Lisbon on the edge by the river, trying to purposefully use a tram. So this way, we're not on that just for the touristy experience. We're getting in with the locals as well. And while we're in Lisbon, we're going to do some fun stuff, right? So we're going to do a bit of a food tour. And some of you might recognize who I'm with there. Be curious if anybody does. But I found Felipa, who does the Taste of Lisboa tours. I actually found her in the Rick Steves Portugal. And so this is one of those great resources. Found her in there. She couldn't do the tour later on in the afternoon that we took with her colleague Danny, but she did meet us. We went out for some of the best chocolate in the world. We went to a local market as well. And the definitely for the kids, the big highlight was this place, the best chocolate, in the world. And we had a just a blast eating some of the chocolate cake there. And she's incredibly sweet, like so wonderful with the kids, so knowledgeable. Just kind of prepped us on the neighborhood we were in, and then later on, kind of what to expect with Danny as we were out on a food tour of Lisbon. And in the market. So we do like our markets. We did pack for a picnic. So we had a little bit of a picnic lunch that day. And I found some of these sardines with my name on them. So I thought that was funny. You can find the Luca. I should have actually bought a bunch of these to take them home. But I thought those were pretty cool. And then in the market itself, there is a little play structure. And so one of the things we do, and my wife and I do this quite a bit. Um, where we do kind of one of us will watch the kids while the other one else is kind of doing something. We'll both be local, right? So we're both in, like in this case, in the market, but we see a play structure where we're gonna let the kids get some energy out while the other one can kind of go around and do a little bit of shopping. And we find that a good way to kind of divide and conquer uh, the children's stuff. And for this one, we also found a great little kids bookstore as well. So on our way out of the market, we ran across this bookstore. So I left the kids there at the bookstore. And so we divided again. So Amina, my wife, was watching the kids while I took off on the tram, went down the hill, and they took the tram later on. So we're all kind of purposefully using the tram with the locals, which I thought was really cool. It's a nice experience to do. And then I got off a little bit early so I could take a little bit of a walk. And one of the things I really, really like about I think about Lisbon in general, Portugal in general, but I think Lisbon specifically, sorry, is some of the street art and how that mixes with like the old architecture with the azulejos, with the tiles as well. So you have this kind of mix of like some of the, older, maybe like Baroque architecture with this like these really kind of these tiles that are coming from definitely like they have some Moorish kind of heritage, but the Portuguese over the years have made them their own thing. And then you have some of the very contemporary kind of graffiti or street art. And I would just find these things when you put them together, they just, I don't know, there's something vibey about it, something pretty interesting about it. And then for any of you who have been to Lisbon, you kind of recognize the main plaza over here with this real big arcade that you're going to go through. And over here is where I met my friend Teresa. And you see Teresa Gomez over there. And this is where I learned a lot about Portuguese wine. So Portuguese wine. So a couple little notes for you guys that I have over here. So Emily, I think you have a glass of Vino Verde, right?
That is correct. And here's the
So
bottle. Yes.
don't drink out of the bottle, right?
Yeah.
So the thing with so Vino Verde. So I'm gonna quote Teresa here. So Teresa says, and I mean, so Teresa, I need to tell, I'm gonna preface it. She taught me so much about Portuguese wine in just like an hour. I felt like I came out with some solid lessons, and I want to share a few of those with you guys. But with her, she says, despite kind of all her knowledge and everything she knows, and I'm going to quote her here. She says, I still struggle with the names of Portuguese grape varietals. What makes Portuguese wines great also makes them difficult to understand and difficult to market. If you can't say the name, you aren't going to order it, right? So I think a lot of the reasons why, if we think about a Portuguese wine, if anybody has, that in their reference, Vino Verde is the one you go to because you can say it, and it is, it's from the north of Porto, it's a popular wine. It's not known for being a little bit sour, kind of dry, and that's a Vino Verde. But she was talking to me about, and we tried a bunch of different wines too, but a couple others that I think people should have on their radar. So whether this is like you're going to go to your local like wine shop, or if you're going to Portugal anytime soon. So the ones that stuck out to me that I think would be really helpful is Castelao. It's kind of like a Pinot Noir. So it's the most planted grape varietal. So if you like Pinot Noirs, you're going to want to look for a Castelao. Um, if you like Napa Valley wines, if you like that sort of style, the Alentejo, that Alentejo, that one I think would be a really, really great wine. I kind of go for a lot of Napa Valley stuff myself. And if you just kind of don't want to, I hate to say make a mistake. There's no real mistakes with wine, but if you want to say, hey, I want to just hedge my bets and get kind of the nicest wine out there, uh, Garafiera is their highest classification. So if you're looking for a wine, if it has that Garafiera on it, then you're like, hey, that's going to be a good wine, right? That's well classified. Um, the recently 2017 was a really good wine year. So if you are in, look for the 2017s. And other than that, just random stuff to know that I thought was kind of really interesting. She said there's over 250 varietals that are native to Portugal and 100 mixed varietals that are also grown there. So those might be international, those might be from elsewhere on the Iberian Peninsula, like in Spain. So there's, in Portugal, you have over 350 different grape varietals. And yeah, that's a lot. So for me, I thought, hey, if you can remember Castelao for, Pinot, if you can Alentejo for Napa Valley, if you can remember Garafiera for, high classification, something that you can spot that's probably going to be pretty good. That might be interesting. That might open up a little bit your window into Portuguese wines. Um, because for me, that if I'm going to go somewhere, I'd like to take away a bit of knowledge, but it's also good going in with a bit more. And one of the things I found with, as I've traveled around, I knew a little bit about Italian wine or French wine before I got there. I didn't know anything about Portuguese wine. And so for like that was one of those things I did without the kids. That was a lot of fun, where I felt like I was learning a lot. Um, this right here. That is my daughter and her new friend. I come back from wine tasting. This is what I come back to. We're in Lisbon, we're at the hotel, and the kids are just playing ping pong. And it was a reminder for me to say, hey, um, one of the things about traveling with kids is, yeah, time on the beach, but even just time at the hotel. And this hotel was kind of fun. It was it's built as a carbon neutral hotel, so we like that idea a lot, and we like the idea of our kids being able to, um, just have a little bit of time there. And they had ping pong tables there. They met some other little kids. Yeah. And that those kind of laughs, for me is kind of what you're in it for. As a family, you want those kind of kitty laughs and everything. Um, and then yeah, so we go take out for our Lisbon for a food tour. Food tour for me is one of those absolute musts. If I'm on a anywhere where I'm traveling where food is a thing, which is most places in the world, I want to be able to like taste, I want to be able to kind of travel through my stomach a little bit. So luckily, we've raised a couple little foodie kids. So we took them out. We had a great time trying. That's with Danny in the lower right over there. But we tried the local cherry. Well, they didn't try the sherry liquor. But yeah, we tried. Like everything from the easy bread and olive oil, so some of the different cheeses to. We went to a place where we had samosas from Mozambique, which again highlights this kind of maritime history, Portugal's connection with Africa, going back to the slave trade a little bit. And of course, we end up with pasta de nata, which is, I mean, if you have a good one, I mean, they're amazing. Um, and one of the things I have with people, like I think us as Americans, particular, when we travel, if we're in charge of like young kids, how different cultures react with kids can open windows, but it might also be uncomfortable for you if you're not used to it. So Portugal, like Spain, like Morocco, like the south of France or Italy, Greece, Turkey, etc. If you come with a kid, people are very friendly with children, so they'll oftentimes, maybe give, kids a kiss on the cheek or be open to holding hands with them. So this is something my kids are just kind of used to these days, but I thought I would point that out. Like, here's our guide, Danny, and she's holding our daughter's hand. We don't think a thing of it. Our daughter's enjoying it. Everyone's kind of enjoying it, and she's safe. And also the guide right there, she's like has her hand, and it's also a safety mechanism as well. So she knows, hey, this little 5-year-old who could take off anywhere. She's safe. And then she gets her moment, then she's gonna meet a kitty in a window, and as we're going along, we're meeting the neighbors, we're, tasting, we're yeah, exploring Lisbon on foot, but at the same time, like every 15, 20 minutes, at least there's a stop for food, or we're stopping to pet a kitty. Sometimes we have to stop to let the kids go, and there's a little labyrinth of tiles over here. We'll see that reflected a little bit later in Porto as well. Um, and so in Lisbon, though, this is sort of like what you're looking at is a lot of the, like fun streets, little moments. And I think for us with the kids, like we skip some of the other sorts of things you might do, other than Sintra, like right outside of Lisbon. But some of the other stuff you might have done in central Lisbon, our kids just didn't. They wanted to play ping pong and do that sort of stuff. But Sintra was big on their list. Our daughter, um, chose this because she wanted to go to Princess Castle. And so that she loves the colors and Sintra, what's not to love? It's a beautiful spot, and so this is a place I would almost say with Sintra, for myself, I preferred the park around it. I found myself exploring the park quite a bit. I was just kind of I've seen a lot of castles, and yeah, it's a beautiful castle. It's colorful, it's interesting. But man, this park is phenomenal. Yeah, and at this time of year, we're going in the summer. You might think it's full of people. It's really not. Everyone's kind of beelining for Sintra, and Gabe has another castle in the region as well that he likes to go to. Um, but for me, I'm really like I enjoy the park there quite a bit. So the park's large. You can explore it on foot. It is hilly, I would say, for anybody like um, with any sort of mobility concerns. Do keep in mind that it can be slippery a little bit in the rain and the stones, and then you're going uphill, downhill a little bit. But man, I mean, it's just like a green space that is open and fresh, and it's wonderful. At the same time, we have this castle. And so the castle, yeah, I mean the castle itself, I think, is one of those things that is a joy to explore. If you love castles, our kids had a blast, particularly. They wanted me to show you guys some of their photos. So one of the things we do is we give each of our kids a little camera to um, take there and to take their own photos, and they develop their own sort of like stories and journals and stuff. So we have a few pictures here from the Zephyr. He's 9 at the time. It's his point of view, and that's his picture of me across the balustrade there. And then my daughter, she picks up on some different details, So she liked a lot of the interiors, some of the lighting. And so she's picking up on different details. But one of the things she caught that I thought was really interesting was this, person cleaning the wood relief over there. Something I wouldn't have necessarily thought about taking a photo of, but it does show the care in which people are preserving their heritage, as well as where they're yeah, I guess like I mean, she's got her gloves on. She's being very careful there. And she's privileged to get to touch that because nobody else can touch that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Lucas, when we were meeting ahead of the show, you said something that your daughter said where she was just amazed that somebody got to touch the treasures in the museum.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I loved that kid's point of view on visiting, an architectural treasure like Sintra. I just thought that was so fun.
Yeah, because you always tell your kids, you look with your eyes, not with your hands, that sort of stuff. So yeah, they're like, wow, we got to touch that. That's amazing, And then we went out surfing. So my wife and I we booked a surfing class, and I'd only been surfing one time. My wife had never been surfing before, so that's her with our surf instructor and at a Sierra. I think I'm all the Portuguese speaking people out there. I'm so sorry. I butcher your language. Uh, so we did a little bit of a walk around town before we head out to the beach. I would say this is if anybody's looking for like a digital nomading spot or like a really chill place to like if you're on a road trip, this would be a great spot to like relax for a couple days. Or just if you have to overnight on a place, a really, really, really easy sort of place to like. Lots of nice restaurants and stuff. Hip little cafes, has a bit of a digital nomad vibe to it. A little bit of a surf camp yoga camp kind of thing too, but man it was really fun. It was great. Not the best weather in terms of blue skies and stuff, but again that's really cold water. um my apologies to my wife too. I had to put this out here because she did great. I have to tell you. So my wife, she got it. So Amina, she was up on that board. I will show you another picture here. I just thought this was great. We did spend a lot of time following her more or me more than her. But this was her most of the time. She was really getting up, finding her balance. And there is something about being able to ride a wave when you're up on it. And I think if you're a decent enough swimmer, um, that yeah, it's a pretty fun activity, and it's something that you can add to make it a bit of a more active sort of holiday and meet a different kind of group of travelers. This is me about to fall off. This is about as good as I did all day. I was horrible. I was absolutely awful over here. Full speed past that.
Lucas, what did the kids do while you two were surfing?
They hung out on the beach. It was really nice. So, the guy actually kind enough to take photos of us. He was like, "Yeah, you could leave your kids here." And we trust our kids a lot. They both know how to swim really well. They both know that water was really cold, so they weren't really going in it. So they were happy, building sand castles and playing with rocks and stuff. So, and we were out there for I think about an hour and a half, 2 hours. So. Yeah, we just made sure that water and a little snack, and they're fine. Um, And I did because we did break this up with some camping, right? So unlike like some of the stores where you're going to be, going from the bus to the hotel, again, the idea is like we're going to do a road trip. And one of the thoughts I had with um doing a road trip in, for me, purposefully doing a road trip in Europe, sometimes it's budget concerns, sometimes it's like, hey, what's a good way to reduce my costs? Well, if you rent it electric, you might be able to rent a car for as little as 20 euros a day, sometimes less. Out of Malaga, last year, I rented an electric Fiat 500 for 12 euros a day. I had it for no, I'm sorry, I had it for 2 weeks. I had it for 14 days. And over 14 days, I spent all of 7.5 euros charging it. And I drove a lot. There's a lot of free charging stations, so that was cost effective. And then the other thought was like, well, if you can't, maybe that's pretty cost effective. So this is one of the other than we like to camp, we thought, hey, maybe cost effective sort of way to go around. So this is sort of our setup. We got our Jeep out here. We have our big tent for the family. We're all kind of sleeping like sardines, right? So we're all like right next to each other. And we did find a little escargot, a little snail over there, one morning after it rained because we're there and it did rain on us. It will rain occasionally on you guys in Portugal there. But camping, it's, you can kind of do some of your things you might think you do when you camp, right? So we did make some food. We did have a game out. There's Zephyr like in the tent, he's goofing around over there. So we did get to do some of that sort of idea for camping. But the sorry, before I go ahead, but the campgrounds, they are quite a bit different, right? So where like in the US, I think I'm at least growing up on the West Coast, we have the campgrounds where you go, you have your spot, you can pitch your tent. But so many of these have gone towards caravans, it's hard to find places that pitch your tent. And even when you do, there's a lot there, right? So every campground we went to, they had swimming pools, they had cafes, they had restaurants. They're set up for like European holidays. So there's actually you could eat like a lot of Europeans use this sort of thing to get around Europe. So what I found in the campgrounds is though we did meet a lot of other American travelers, we met a ton of European travelers. So a lot of people from Germany, Netherlands, Spain, France, and Portugal as well. So we were meeting a lot of different European travelers. So for those of you looking to mix locally, that's actually kind of an interesting, I find kind of an interesting way to do it. And know that when you go camping, it is very much not like camping like I grew up with. Like it's pretty easy. And a lot of those campgrounds actually do have rentals too. So they have like full-time not even tents, like little lodges that you can rent there for very inexpensively. So for people road tripping, you wouldn't even have to, if you're coming from the US, you wouldn't even have to pack your tent necessarily. You can just, look on the website and find their small cabins, the chalets. They usually call them chalets. I'll put that chalet in quotes. On our way, so from the campground from Ericeira, we're gonna go through Costa Nova, which is known for these beautiful striped houses, before we head up to Porto. Costa Nova, I would say, is one of those like honestly like just postcard perfect little towns. Like it truly, truly, truly is just like you just have these rows of striped houses. We got there on a super blue day. I mean it was we got out, we walked around a little bit, but I will say as well, it is quite touristy as well. And that's not just internationals, it's a lot of Portuguese and stuff. It's a place you stop. I almost feel like if you're around the Seattle area, if you ever go to like Leavenworth, it has that kind of feel to it. It has a little bit of that Leavenworth vibe to it. Where yeah, it's tourist, it's cool, but it is kind of touristy for locals as well as everybody else. So yeah, we thought a couple pictures and we'll sort of be on our way as how we felt a little bit about there. And in Porto. So Porto's our other big city, right? And it has again amazing history. Porto is kind of lined up on both sides of the river, really. You do have kind of the one and the other, but there are couple sides, and we had a good time just taking some photos from our hotel, looking across the river. And we stayed on the side of the river a little bit because we did want the views of Porto. It was one of those purposeful things where we're thinking through like, oh, where should we stay central this time? Should we stay on the edge? And we kind of on this one we like to stay because the on the other side of Porto over here you have a nice promenade where you can walk along the water that has a lot of kind of fun little things for kids, but you're also right by the funicular too, which I love to take. And views are great there. And we took a very cool bike tour, and it happened to be that the bike rental place was right up the street from here too. So for us, a lot of stuff we wanted to do was already kind of local to our hotel. So that's one of the things I do think about in terms of when I'm planning my travel, I think almost in terms of experiences before I think of accommodation. And then I want an accommodation that's kind of close to the experiences I want to do usually. So that way I'm not spending a lot of time in transport just trying to get to this accommodation or that accommodation, or that experience or this experience or something. So I do think about that. So the bike tour we did with Cyclo. They were kind enough to loan us a couple bikes. It so happens I bought my bike that I use in Tangier from this very same outfit in Porto. So I've been in contact with these guys for years. So it was nice to get back up there and say hi to everybody and to kind of see what this looks like a little bit. That's me again. I have the just my little Sony tickle tick, but I have this in my pocket as I'm taking a picture of Amina as we're and Maya in the back there as we're going through the streets of Porto. And we didn't really know, honestly, like they gave us, it wasn't a bike tour. It was just like, here, take a couple bikes and go around. So we weren't sure exactly what we wanted to do. So we were looking for something kind of interesting that everyone would kind of be interested somehow in. So we found this Reese Mueller museum that my wife and I liked quite a bit with some of the art, and we get the kids kind of interested in that. But the Reese Mueller Museum was, I thought, pretty interesting. And next to it is this like human-sized labyrinth. I'm tall enough I could see over the hedges. You can get a idea of this here though. But we must have spent an hour and a half or so, 2 hours, maybe not quite 2 hours, but we spent quite a bit of time here enjoying like a life-size labyrinth. It's not often you get to do that. And so we had the kids popping up, trying to scare each other, trying to get lost, doing their best Home Alone impression, the was that Macaulay Culkin face? But yeah, a lot of running around. In the background on the bottom right there, you can see in the background that's the Reese Mueller Museum over there. Um, but yeah, we thought this was a very interesting kind of outing to do and a little bit different for what a lot of people do in Porto. But if you do a bike tour, a couple things I'd say. Um, I'm very used to biking, and for me, the hills aren't a problem. We're on an e-bike, so you have like the electronic assist, so it's really pretty easy to cycle around. But if you're not used to riding in an urban landscape with a lot of other cars and having to share the road with the car, if you're in a place where you're doing a lot of trails and stuff, you might want to give yourself a little bit of practice before you do something like that. Um, yeah, and then we can go on to a random. So in Porto, you will find a ramen shop, Japanese ramen, where they do serve it by the robot. So the robot comes and brings out your ramen. Our kids are huge into manga and Pokemon and all that sort of stuff. So this is one of those, you're not going to find it necessarily, I don't think, in most guidebooks, but I think be open to this sort of thing when especially if you're traveling, if you're like one of those, if you're a grandparent or a parent and you're looking at like younger travelers at all, be open to like feeding them what they want occasionally, even if it's like outside of the like what you might expect locally. Um, so yeah, our kids happen to be heavy into the Japanese stuff, so we really enjoyed our time at the little ramen shop there before we came back on the bikes. But yeah, that is the kind of bike you can expect to use there too. So that's that bike there is what you would call like a cargo bike, so you can fit one. I actually had both kids in there at one point. They both wanted to ride with me at one point, so you can fit a couple kids or an adult back there. Maybe not a me-sized adult, but a regular sized adult I think could fit back there no problem. My wife and I have gone out where I've been biking and she's been riding as well. So that could be a fun outing, and that's something we like to do in Porto. We also like a good view. So one of the fun things to do over in Porto, I think, is take the funicular, where you're going to take this up from the water, right on the kind of riverside walk there, and it's going to take you up the bridge, and then you're going to end up at a big lookout point. And the big lookout point up here is I tell you, every time I've been here, there's always something going on. And it is almost like it's not quite an like it is an amphitheater, I guess. It's a small one, like a small little amphitheater they have at the top. But there's always some sort of performances happening there. And just to get a feel for the, local scene, it's similar to yeah, maybe going out to again, I'll just in Seattle, I think Pike Place Market a little bit, something like that. Volunteer Park maybe. But yeah, if inevitably like was when I was living in San Francisco, there's definitely like spots that you go to that there's gonna be the locals out, making the music, up in Golden Gate Park or something like that. So I mean, this is one of those places where you're just like, yeah, yeah, this is a place where people hang out. And it's everybody. It's locals, it's international. And that makes for a lot of fun. Um, and then so yeah, so we're well, 9 days in. We got our kind of last night, and we're having a great time so far. We have a bit of a long drive back to Sevilla, and eventually home for us. But like you drop off your car in Sevilla, but we're gonna cross the mountains, and the mountains are drop dead gorgeous. I mean, I was going through some of these, and they did remind me a little bit of the Cascades or something like that. But it's a beautiful mountain range. But it has all these like nice old world sort of moments to it, where you're like, yep, you're definitely still in Europe. You're going to stop in these, small towns, and you're going to see these churches and these cemeteries. But man, like you look at that view and you're just like, wow, this is incredible. So we stopped here for a little bit of a hike for what should have been a highlight. So even more than me, my wife really enjoys high things. And so we thought we'd go over the highest suspension bridge in Europe. So we purchased tickets ahead of time. We, followed the instructions. We parked in the village. We have this, it was pretty hot out too. It was about 85 or so degrees, maybe a little bit hotter in the sun. And, it's about I don't know, was it 2 kilometers, so about a mile hike into the woods through the village to get to this suspended bridge, right? So we're going to leave our car. We got our water bottles. We're going to walk. And we get to this suspended bridge, and that is as close as we can go because we were a little bit late and they had closed for their lunch hour. And they said, well, you can come back at like we got there right at 12 when they're closing. And they say, well, you can come back at 1 o'clock. And I was like, well, what do we do until 1 o'clock? They're like, well, you can hike back to the town. And I, with my 5-year-old, that's about an hour. Like it's gonna take her an hour to get back. Like if not, well, not maybe an hour, but a half an hour to go back to town, and then a half an hour back, right? So I'm like, well, we hiked there, we hiked, and we wanted to make sure we weren't driving in the mountains at dark. So we made the difficult decision to say, okay, that's as close as we're gonna get to the world's, or to Europe's highest suspended bridge, and so we're gonna leave. Unfortunately, our GPS fails, and so we're in the mountains of Portugal and we're trying to get to the next stop. We have no GPS. So this is where I say, make sure you have a paper map because we literally had to pull it out and use it. And I was like, Amina, let me get a picture of you while you're doing this. But she's honestly trying to figure out like, okay, where are we? What is the road there? Because we don't know the road out, and we don't want to go the wrong direction. And there's like a handful of directions we can go. None of the markings make any sense to us because they're only saying what the next kind of village is, so or the next town. So that map set us on the right way. So we got on the right path, and I want to say it was about 10 minutes after this, our GPS kind of kicked back up. So we were like, oh yes, we're on the right path. We can make it to the next stop. Um, I had a couple little things for just, if you're traveling with kids, if you're doing a road trip, I think just traveling in general, it's good to have a couple things handy. A bathroom kit, we got used to traveling with in Morocco. So like toilet paper, soap, maybe hand sanitizer, uh, have that. This is something I found we used all the way through. Be prepared to have emergency stops, which is what we're doing there. And, that's not just a kid thing, though. That's also for adults. Adults get car sick too. And I think it's okay to like have to stop the car and, take a moment and if you have to be sick, but allow that to happen, right? And related to the above, a couple plastic bags I think is very handy to have. We always have that in the car. And then we always have water bottles too, and we use filter water bottles, so like a couple I have that I'm a big fan of. Life Straw. I'm gonna plug you guys. So Life Straw, man, this is my little water bladder for Life Straw. It has a little filter on the top, so I go hiking with this. I fill it up with mountain water, and it's filtered out, no problem at all. Um, my friends at Grail too. I mean, Grail does a really cool water bottle as well. I use this one in the car all the time for road trips. Um, really good solutions, I think. I think for all of us who are concerned about plastic waste or just trying to travel a little bit more simply, have a water bottle. A lot of us do that anyway. But if you do a filtered water bottle, then you can kind of be sure, like whatever kind of water source you're using, it's a safe one. And of course, don't panic, to quote my favorite guidebook of all time, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. But yeah, don't panic, like it's all going to be fine. Um, and then last stop, Castelo Branco. So Castelo Branco, not a lot going. Like I thought here, we had a nice little hotel, but they do have this weird mix of like some very new architecture that's happening over here, alongside like some old town stuff as well. But it made for an easy overnight. We had um, apparently this was the birthplace of one of the world's great accordionists. So I thought that was nice that got highlighted. The kids were really happy. We had pizza this night, super easy pizza. But Castelo Branco, I thought was a nice, easy place to break up a drive to get back to Sevilla. And the one other thing we did is we did stop at our Senora of Grace Fortress. This is like I didn't, this is funny. I didn't know about this. My son was teaching me about this. So, um, there was a moment where technology was advancing and they created fortresses instead of like squares or circles. They were doing these star-shaped fortresses. And the idea was when you shot a cannonball, the angle of the walls as their stars, like the ball's going to hit that angle of the wall and then kind of glance off it instead of hitting it dead on. And so my son was teaching me about this, and he was very interested in exploring this fortress. So this again, it highlights a lot of the maritime history. Highlights here's a Roman aqueduct out there, which is pretty cool. But again, one of those things where you're going back through the history of the region and highly like again one of those I don't know like a moment in medieval time when there was a thought of architecture happening and advancement happening, and this is one of the best preserved examples in all of Europe. And it had I mean, some obviously fantastic views, some great moments all the way around, in terms of seeing like kind of the details and exploring how the fortress layout worked and where the soldiers would be. And our kids got super into this. So they're screaming for joy there. They got so into this, trying to find all the little dragons and all the other little stuff. But yeah, and then my son wanted to leave you guys with a couple last little photos where this is my son wanted to share a couple of the things that he found because he likes to find cool stuff as he's traveling. So a couple of the little details that he found around our time on the road trip through Portugal, where he was finding, street painters and little dragons in the ceiling and decorative, bits of tile that he really liked. Yeah, as we're taking photos and exploring a little trip through Portugal there. So there's the family. And I guess I'll leave you guys with this. If you're interested, I do the guidebooks. So I have the moon guidebooks for Sevilla, Granada, Andalusia, Morocco. All places I feel much more fluent in than Portugal. I always feel like I'm like Portugal, I've been there a couple times, but yeah, not nearly as in depth as Morocco and Sevilla and stuff. But hopefully you guys all learned a couple things. I know I did along the way. I definitely learned a lot on my journey through Portugal, and I can't wait to go back. It's one of those things that's just a road trip away. And then next year I'll have just a little thing for you guys. I'll have my new Morocco books coming out, fourth edition. I just finished copy edits for that. And I'll be going through proofs, I think, next week. And then that'll be in bookstores next year. So thanks guys. Thanks for all your
Thank you,
questions.
Lucas.
There's a ton of questions. I've seen them pop up.
Okay, can you stop sharing your screen now for me? Perfect. All right,
Oh
well,
man.
Lucas, thank you for playing tour guide for us for an hour. That was fantastic. And as you mentioned, we do have a number of questions for you. But before we get to those, I do have a quick word from our sponsor. And our sponsor this evening is the brand new 13th edition of our Portugal Guidebook. This book has been meticulously researched by our team of expert guidebook researchers and even Rick himself, which means you can take Rick along to Portugal with you, and he will give you his picks for the sightseeing, sleeping, and eating all along the way. And you should be able to find a link to our guidebook in the chat widget there. And now, on to a couple questions for you, Lucas. So, we did have a couple people wondering if you got range anxiety when you were driving your EV across Europe, and did you have a difficult time finding charging stations?
Yes and no. So I at the very first I did have range anxiety, and that has mostly to do with we have a plug-in hybrid at home that only has like 40 kilometers or 20 miles or something like that, 25 miles. So we can get around town on electric, but once we go on a road trip, we definitely are using gas. We kind of have to do that in Morocco. In Europe, I it's one of those things I researched, but I wasn't sure. You kind of don't know until you do it, I think sometimes. But I could say very confidently, like you can get around Western Europe with absolutely no issues. Like that, I don't think I've been yet in a place like you'd have to be pretty remote mountain country, I think, to hit it because to hit your limits. Because these days, if you're getting 300 something miles, you're going to be fine. There's so many charging stations, and a lot of them are free. A lot of times, if you're stopping at a grocery store, you can plug in, it's free or near free. So um yeah, so I wouldn't worry about that. But yeah, I definitely did have range anxiety. But I found, yeah, not a problem at all. I will say the one other thing people are bringing up in the comments, and I get it, the names and like the Portuguese names and stuff. And I think Emily, I think you will send out an email maybe where I can make sure we have all that on there. So I'll be like,
Yes.
okay, here's some of the wine stuff. Here's some of the places we went to. Here's a couple of the, people, a couple of the, all that stuff.
Yes, and we'll spell it out for you, so we'll make it even easier. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
all right. Nancy is actually taking, I believe, her two grandsons with her to
Nancy.
Portugal next year. So this is a great show for her.
Perfect.
And she is wondering if you have any tips for multi-generational traveling. So maybe you have kids, parents, and the
Yep.
grandparents all together. Any
Yeah.
advice?
Well, it depends on the age of the kids almost more than anything else, because like the advice, like kids and stuff, like the advice is different, say, for a toddler or a 5-year-old than it is for a 13-year-old or a 16-year-old. So it does depend. I think if she's saying grandkids, maybe they are a little bit younger, maybe around my kids' age. My big things is we divide the day in half. So usually we'll have like a planned thing in the morning and then a free afternoon. So it's like a planned thing, we do lunch and then a free afternoon. And that's a really good pace for our children at this age. We've also done days where it's like, hey guys, it's going to be a full day. We have a lot of stuff to do. And then the next day they get a free day. And they like that. They like the unstructured playtime. Sometimes they just want to explore a hotel or a hotel room. My kids are bookworms, so sometimes they just want to read books for, a few hours. So I think kind of dividing that up a little bit where you're like, okay, so here's the time chunk we have, here's our time budget. Now, how are we going to allot that time budget and give the kids some of that as well?
Yeah, and it sounds like you give them a consistent schedule that way as
Try,
well. Yeah,
try to. Yeah.
wonderful.
As good as you can do when you're traveling. Because in
Yes.
traveling, inevitably, there's a day you sleep in, there's a day you wake up early, whatever. Yeah.
Of course, of course. And I will ask you just one more question. And I am wondering what your favorite part of this road trip was. It looks like a really successful road trip, so it could be hard to choose.
Ooh. All right. So if I was successful surfing, it would have been that for Brad, but I wasn't. That goes to my wife. So Mina was awesome at surfing. So I think that's maybe a big highlight. Sardines was a big highlight for everybody. The sardine factory, I think we all like that. Um, I don't, yeah, my highlight might have actually been riding bikes through Porto. I just love bike riding. Like it's one of those things like I didn't know that I loved until I didn't do it for a while and I got back into it. And I think there is something just really neat about exploring an old town with your family on a bike and the kids are in the back and they're waving to everybody and hola, hola, hola. Like I mean it's fun, it's friendly, it's different. It's yeah, for me that's maybe a that's maybe the biggest highlight. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Lucas, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed this virtual road trip through Portugal, and I'm so happy that this resource gets to live on our website now and inspire more parents and grandparents to take the kiddos with them to Europe. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
All right. Well, thank you again, Lucas. And before we close the show, I just want to remind you all that we are back next week on November 3rd. My colleague Colleen Schaefer will return to cover Greece beyond Athens. And until then, happy travels.